Hello, dear friends. I wanted to make a video for you guys because I kind of stumbled across something that has been very helpful in the life of my middle schooler. And it's information that I have shared with other parents who have also found this idea to be useful. And so I wanted to share with you guys. Now, I have 4 boys, ages 17, 13, 10, and 8. And I have run an in-home daycare. I have experience with kids, but I am by no means trying to suggest that I am an expert in parenting or in child psychology or in child development. So first caveat there, just one parent trying to share information with other parents. My second caveat for you is that myself and my children, we are Christians, unapologetically. We believe that the Bible is our rule for faith and for life. So some of this project involves leaning on Scripture for our ideas. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a good idea if you're not a Christian. I think anyone could utilize this tool and find great use for it. But I do want to put that out there. So if for some reason hearing about God or Jesus or the Bible offends you, then this is not the video for you. Okay. So the reason that I created this is my 13-year-old son has been struggling a little bit with finding a framework for his decision-making process, and he has needed to establish a filter for internal and external sin or influence or just junk that was getting in the way of him being successful, especially socially successful. So I have a therapist who had explained to me that children from about birth to 5 years old are initially very selfish. Anyone who has small kids, that's not a shocker to you. Children are inherently, at that age, think very much of themselves. They kind of think that the world revolves around them, or that they are literally the center of the universe. And that's a survival instinct for them. Then they transition as they get a little bit older, like after the age of 5, give or take. Then they start identifying themselves through the lens of their parents, meaning they see how a little bit of themselves comes from their dad, a little bit of themselves comes from their mom, and maybe their dad's family and their mom's family. And they start to identify themselves through their parents. But then when they hit puberty, they transition back into being selfish. Again, not surprising to anyone who has teenagers. So they try, and this is where they are intentional about wanting to separate themselves from their parents. And this is where you can kind of get some of that butting of heads. And it's important that we encourage our children in that age, in that middle school, puberty age, encourage them to find themselves and encourage them to be an individual, and that we don't enforce all of our rules as parents on them in a way that they don't take ownership of those rules unless they make sense for them. So my son was struggling because he's very much a people pleaser. He's really sweet and empathetic when it comes to other kids, and he was allowing his care for others to dictate how people were treating him. Because of being a people pleaser, he wanted someone to like him enough that he wouldn't put his foot down when they were doing something to him that was not appropriate, or in order to get a laugh or to attract friends, he would say and do things that weren't appropriate. He was getting in trouble at school, he was getting in trouble at home, And his dad and I were just pulling our hair out, trying to figure out, we're like, we haven't taught you to be this way. You haven't been raised to think that some of these behaviors are acceptable. And out of respect for my son, I'm not going to go into great detail about that. And I don't think it's really important. I think anyone who has kids who struggle with wanting our children to find a place, to find a voice, and to be comfortable with sticking up for themselves in a way that's not offensive to others. So what this is my son Aaron, what he and I did was, I wanted him to have a framework for identifying who he is and how he finds his place in the world. And I wanted him to be confident in who he was in relation to other people. And I was really starting to worry that maybe he couldn't see the positivity in himself. So I haven't really known how to describe this project except maybe a vision board or an affirmation board. But I wanted to give him something tangible because we all learn differently. And his dad and I have spoken, we've spoken to him and we've tried to model to him quality behavior. But I realized, maybe he needs to actually see tangibly what I'm talking about when I talk about kindness, when I talk about courage, or, those things. So what we did was we sat down and I asked him, I asked him to think about personal values. That was the first thing that we tackled. What are Aaron's personal values? And those values are qualities that he already has and qualities that he wants to have that maybe he needs to work on a little bit. And we sat down and I asked him, so in some of those qualities it took him a little bit to explain. So for instance, he was telling me that it's really important to him and he thinks he does a good job of standing up for other people. If there is a bully or, my puppy, no Calvin. If there's a bully or someone behaving inappropriately, he sticks up for the person who's getting picked on. And so he didn't really know how to put into words what that was. And so I said, you do a good job of being the hero. Well, a hero needs bravery or courage. Are one of those words, do you think one of those words fits to describe that aspect of yourself? And he said yes. He felt like courage was an accurate description for that piece. I told him, and then he talked about empathy. He did a good job of describing empathy. And I told him I said, well, what do you think about kindness? Does that sound like a good word to describe kindness? He said yes. Then one of the things that he said that he wanted to work on more, because I tell him, you aren't going, boys, and I'm sure I only have boys, I'm sure girls too, they have an idea of who they want to become someday. They have a loose idea of who they want to become someday. And so I said, you aren't going to be the man that you want to be without practice and intentionality. You have to think intentionally about who you want to be and who you see yourself being someday. Otherwise, you're going to be whatever your situation molds you to be. So he said that one of the characteristics that he wanted to work on was honesty. So we sat down and he came up with 6 personal values that he thinks fit into who he is as a person, and values that he wants to be intentional about and that he wants to practice on a regular basis. Then we also sat down, with the values, he gave me a description. He kind of described to me, and we sat on the floor in my bedroom with my laptop, and he was did this teenager thing, rolled up in a blanket and a hoodie. We just sat there and talked about all these values, and we took our time doing this to make sure, again, the biggest thing is I wanted to make sure that this was his thing. I didn't want my words on his vision and affirmation board. I wanted to make sure that this was him. So he gave me a description for each of the values. And then I did a Google search for a couple different definitions of the words, and we kind of spliced together his words and official definitions to make a definition of each of the words that he felt like was an accurate description for those words. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you the board. It's kind of big, and I'm hoping that with like the mirror effect on the camera, you'll still be able to see it. So that's panned out wide. So let me show you. Here's two of the words, strength and honesty, and then courage and patience, kindness and self-control. And you can go back and pause those if you were interested in reading the definitions that he gave. But then beyond that, we also, another thing that I thought was really important for him to learn was boundary setting. So that, I want him to see that it's really important to have boundaries for how people treat him. And I want him to practice understanding then that it's really important that he respect the boundaries of other people. So, for instance, I wanted to make sure that I knew from him, what are behaviors that you're not going to accept from others? Ways that people may or may not want to treat you. What are you going to allow and what are you not going to allow? So that he can kind of help filter out. Again, he's such a people pleaser. I wanted him to have a way to filter out people that aren't good for him. And I said, you don't have to be friends with everyone. I don't know that all children have this problem, but he really definitely feels the pressure to be friends with everyone, which means that he then allows those people to influence who he is or use him. So I said, we need to establish boundaries. So he sat down and he created boundaries for himself. So, for instance, I will not allow people to push me around. I will not allow people to influence me to do wrong or to sin. I will use the Bible as my rule for life. I will stay true to my personal values, and I will not create idols. So those are his personal boundaries. And then, again, we are Christians, and we use the Bible to guide us in our faith and our life, guide our actions. So we found Bible verses that were meaningful for him. And the way that I researched Bible verses, and if you're interested, I'll name a couple of them. 1 Corinthians 16, 13 through 14. Be watchful, stand firm in your faith, act like men, be strong, let all that you do be done in love. Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So he found 5 Bible verses that he felt like fit for his vision and affirmation board. And the way that we did that was I took some of his personal values and I threw them into Google, and I said, Bible verses on patience, Bible verses on strength, Bible verses on kindness. And we read and filtered through a good 30 Bible verses. And, I would read them to him, and I said, I firmly believe that the Spirit moves in each of our hearts and each of our consciences differently. And just because a Bible verse may be convicting to my spirit and to my heart where I am in life now doesn't mean that it's going to resonate with him. So, again, I wanted to be very careful about making sure that this is him and, that I am just facilitating the accomplishment of this project. So we read a bunch of Bible verses. He found 5 that he felt were helpful and supportive of this project, and so we typed those out. Then I did a little playing with fonts and stuff like that on my computer, and just real simple. Put everything together, cut it all out, and then I gave him the board and the cutouts and a glue stick, and I said, I want you to put it all together now. So now he has it in his room where, I can encourage him in the morning before he goes to school. When he's having a bad day or a week, I can say, remember, you are kind, you are strong, you are honest, you are patient. and to remind him to be those things, and to not let someone else tell him that he is anything other than those things. And then when he missteps, you know, he's got two little brothers who can be very maddening. And he can be very reactive in his relationship with them. So, you know, his definition of kindness is showing empathy to others even when they are in the wrong. So, you know, when he becomes angry and very reactive towards his brothers, I can sit him down and say, you know, remember, kindness is showing empathy to others even when they're wrong. You know, your brothers were wrong for behaving in such a way towards you, but you are a kind person. You are better than this, and it's important that you remember to come back to who you are. Don't allow others to influence you. You know, that's also one of his boundaries. I will not allow others to influence me to do wrong. So this has just been a really useful tool for encouraging him, for kind of giving his walk and his steps some boundaries and some guidelines, and allow him to focus on who he is and who he needs to be. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. I hope this is something that you'll find useful and that you might want to incorporate into your own life. And I think it's, like I said, it's really important to make sure that this is authentic to the child who's doing it. Make sure that it's something that they've bought into, that it's not, because otherwise I don't think it's going to be terribly effective. And we're still in the early stages of, we've been using this for a couple months now. Excuse me. And so far we've really enjoyed being able to, it's been another tool in my parenting kit at a time when I felt like I was not doing very well as a parent. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.